Okay, secondary dominance conversation. We're going to start with our descending fifths progression. This is the core of all chord progressions in tonal music. Tonal music meaning the major and minor system that we use for classical music and pop music for the most part in our culture. Some of the more modern stuff doesn't use this descending fifth sequence as its foundation, but our general harmony does, and for the concept of secondary dominance, this is very important because these are all descending fifths progression. You might see from 5 to 1 is a fifth going down, but 2 to 5 is also a fifth going down. You can check that by going 2, 1, 7, 6, 5, and that will be true for all of these. 3 to 6 is a fifth down, 6 to 2 is a fifth down, 2 to 5, 5 to 1. They're all fifths down. So if these are fifths down, any one of them can function as a dominant of the one below it. Easy to see here. In the tonic key, or in the key that we're in, let's say we're in C major, G is the 5 of C. Well, D can be the 5 of G if we create a pretend chord of G major. So we are really in the key of C major. But if we want to use a secondary dominant, the most common one that we're going to use is called 5 of 5. So what we're going to do is we're going to pretend that we are in the key of 5, or in the dominant key. In this case, in C major, this is going to be a G chord. We are going to pretend that we are in the key of G for just a moment, and we're going to use, in the key of G, we're going to use a 5 or a 5/7 going to 1. Now in the key of G, 1 is G, and 5 is D, or D7 if you're using the dominant, or D major triad if you're just using the triad. Now in the key of C, in our original key of C, we do not have a D major triad. The D chord in the key of C is supposed to be a minor triad. But if we change this one to what looks like a major 2, we have created a secondary dominant, because 2 chord cannot be major in any major key. The 2 chord has to be minor. So if you find a 2 chord that's major, you are not going to call it a 2 chord. You are going to call it a 5 of 5. And if it has a 7th on it, you're going to call it a 5/7 of 5. So in the key of C, this would be a D major triad, or a D dominant 7 chord. And it would serve to decorate the 5 chord, and the chord after it has to be the 5 chord. Now, go back to our original chord map descending fifths sequence, chord sequence. I can do this at any level here. If I want to take this 6 chord, which would be in the key of C, this would be an A minor chord. If I just turn that into an A major chord, using an accidental, C sharp in this case, now I don't have a minor 6 chord anymore. Now I have what looks like a major 6 chord, but in a major key of C, you cannot have a major 6 chord. Major keys have to have a minor 6 chord. And if you find a major 6 chord, or if you find a dominant 7 chord, even more strongly, you have found a secondary dominant. This one, in the key of C, is actually going to be 5 of 2. And we use lowercase 2 because the pretend key that we're talking about here is the key of D minor. In the key of D minor, your 5 chord is, so pretend you're in the key of D minor for just a second, and you're going to use a 5 and a 1. So that would be an A major triad, or an A dominant 7 chord if it has a G on it, tagged on the end. And that chord will serve as a 5 of 2. This is one way to use your secondary dominants, is to take your descending fifths core of your chord map and turn any one of them into a dominant, or turn all of them into a dominant. You can play this one in, you can turn this one into a dominant, and then this one, and this one, and this one is already dominant. And when you're done with that progression, you're going to have 5 of 6 going to 5 of 2, going to 5 of 5, going to 5, and then going to 1. And we have gone all the way around the circle of fifths using major triads in this case. Or dominant seventh chords can also be done going just around the circle of fifths. You don't have to stop here. You can go one more. If you take your 1 chord and turn it into a dominant 7, you're not allowed to call it a dominant 7, but you can call it a secondary dominant. And in this case, we have taken a C chord in the key of C major. The 1 chord is C. We turned it into a dominant 7th. We could not use a major triad because it's supposed to be a major triad. So where it's supposed to be a major triad, your only option is to turn it into a dominant 7th chord if you want it to be a secondary dominant. So if I take this 1 chord and I turn it into a 5-7 of something, then I can ask myself, C, or what would be this chord normally? If it's dominant, then it's not a 1 chord anymore. Now it's a 5-7 of something. And what is C 5 of? And the answer is F, which is 4 in the key of C. If you ever turn your tonic into a dominant 7th chord, it will always be 5-7 of 4. In a minor key, your tonic triad is supposed to be minor. So in a tonic key, you can actually have just 5 of 4. Sorry, in a minor key, you can have just 5 of 4. You don't need 5-7 of 4. But in a major key, it has to be 5-7 of 4 because this triad is already major. Therefore, if you make it a major, make it a dominant triad, it sounds exactly like this, and that can't be used. So this is the first way to use it, is on your descending fifths progression. But there's another way to use these secondary dominants, and that is take a progression, any progression that follows your chord map, and you can decorate one of these chords or expand one of these chords to make it more important or more interesting or just to draw a little extra attention to it. You can put in a secondary dominant on a chord as a decoration. Now, these two chords are kind of functioning together as a larger unit. They're more interesting than just a simple triad that we had before. Now we've got a triad that's decorated with its own dominant. Or we could say, if we're in the key of C again, this would be a pretend key of G. You go into the pretend key of G for just a moment, and you give a 5-7 to 1 in your pretend key. In this case, 5 is the pretend key. And there are the two chords that show up in the key of G. This can be done on just about any chord. The only time you can't do it is if your pretend key would be diminished. So you can't have like a 5-7 of 7 diminished because your pretend key can't be diminished. Your pretend key has to be either a major or a minor key.